Now, again, the issue we suffer with in South Florida, and all over the world is suffering with it, as the seas rise, is erosion, correct? You know, oddly enough, and I don't know if you're aware of this, our beaches are pretty much filled with sand that comes from another country, the Bahamas. Every fall, they had to replace this last fall 250,000 cubic tons of sand, and that was done by buying sand from the Bahamas, importing it to the United States, and my next door neighbor was a contractor who actually was here just to get the sand replenished. Miami Beach has one of the largest, especially in the south, largest artificial beaches in the country. It's all artificial because of erosion. So again, that would be a loss of land due to natural forces. Accretion on the other side, which is highlighted, would be an increase of land due to natural forces. People who live in Hawaii. Hawaii is all built on lava. Yes. The volcano hiccups. Instead of 100 feet, you have 100 acres, right?
Right.
Yeah. Accretion is a good thing, if you can stand the volcano. Now, again, alluvium would be the mineral deposits, and again, we do have issues, and one of the most famous issues was in Katrina, when New Orleans was underwater. Has anyone ever been to New Orleans? I gotta tell you something, I've been there a few times, but the first time I went there, I got scared to death.
Because of the grades?
No, I don't worry about that. By the way, we get floaters in New Orleans because of, is that what you're talking about? You're right, you know New Orleans very well. Actually, they have to bury people, not in coffins, but they have to use concrete vaults so the coffins don't float up and away. But the scariest thing I ever saw was when I went to the shores of the Mississippi River, and I looked up, not down. And I said, this could possibly be a problem. And everyone said, don't worry about a thing. New Orleans has been here. We're so well damned it'll never happen. Until Katrina came.
Right.
And guess what? The entire city was underwater. And what happened was, it became a really great thing for developers. Why? Because all those old cruddy houses got swept away. And the developers are now redeveloping. And again, this will never happen again.
I don't know about that.
You don't believe Pinocchio?
He's
How
joking.
dare
Oh,
you?
okay.
He's joking.
How dare you not believe Pinocchio?
Never say never.
How dare
My
you?
head was down.
But actually,
They didn't have to pay for destruction.
actually what happened was, as the storm stopped, religion uncovering the land for development. So now you have a visual of that. Now, here is the issue that comes into play in a real estate or real property transfer. It is the real property that will be included in the transaction. Personalty, chattel, personal property, unless contractually agreed upon, is not considered part of a real property exchange. So, for the professional, understanding the difference between personalty, chattels, or personal property versus real property is highly significant. So any asset that would not be considered in the legal sense real property is chattel. And chattel can be removed at any time. Chattel is movable, real property cannot be easily moved without damage. Now, again, we get many sellers who want to sell their properties, and I walked to the property, and you know, many of them came to Florida with really nice stuff that they hung on their ceilings, right? I had one seller, they live in Winston Towers, and they had a beautiful Tiffany chandelier. And you know, I looked at the property itself. The one-bedroom, one-bath unit in Winston Towers had a property value of about $100,000. However, the chandelier was worth $300,000. So I said to the owner, you know, if you get it out of here, you don't have to contractually exclude it. But if it's included and we forget to contractually exclude it, you've sold a unit for $100,000 along with a $300,000 chandelier. Congratulations. So again, we had the owner sever it or remove it. The chandelier attached to the ceiling was real property. It was a fixture. The chandelier, once removed and replaced by another inexpensive fixture, was in a box, easily movable. It became chattel. So again, real property can become chattel through severance. On the other hand, chattels can become real property through attachment. So again, we attach a piece of property, chattel, to the property. It becomes part of the transaction. If it's not attached to the property, cannot do damage by removal, it becomes chattel, personal property. You know, the reason they show an electric stove rather than a gas stove is if the electric stove is not attached to anything, it becomes chattel, it can be removed. On the other hand, when we attach it to the cabinets, it becomes part of the property, fixed, real property. Now again, the term fixture simply means fixed, attached. So an item that was once a chattel, personal property, has now become real property, part of the transaction. Now the reason we use gas stoves and bathtubs, these are not arbitrary, because a gas stove can be real property or personal property. Interestingly enough, a bathtub can also be personal property, not as always real property. Yes. How dare you challenge me by that dirty look you give, all of you? I'll tell you. You know, the normal stove, electric stoves that we have, are just plugged in. Easily removable, if you will. Right? That's why we use gas stoves. But again, if I had a gas stove in my house, and it was attached to a propane tank, which was freestanding, rather than a gas line in the property, that gas stove would not be real property, it would be called a chattel. There are some old bathtubs. And grandma and grandpa, Anuka and Abuka, had a bathtub in their two-bedroom apartment in Little Hungary on the east side. And the bathtub they had claw feet, was not attached to anything. How did they fill it? They boiled water on the stove, poured it in, and then filled it with enough cool water. And on Saturday night, the whole 10 family members took their bath. Yes, every Saturday night. It was bath time. That bathtub would have been a chattel, personal property, because it wasn't attached to anything. Usually they're attached to the main water line, and they're grouted into the property, right? They're real. Now again, for the importance for us, the professional, real property, unless excluded contractually, must be included in the transaction. Personal property's chattel, unless included in the contract, does not have to be left with the properties. Again, the contract is what the courts would look at, and the last place we ever want to end up with our lawyers is in a courtroom. We want this to be clear. So again, if there's a disagreement as to fixture or chattels, then there could be a lawsuit. Lawsuits are highly unproductive to closings. So again, there should be clarity in everything in these large transactions. The courts have 4 tests which we speak to owners about when they're putting their property on the market. And the 4 tests have a nickname. Her name is Irma. Irma says this: was it meant to be part of the real property? Must it be there, or can it be removed without